Okay, welcome to our Excellence in Legal Research session on the fundamentals of Boolean searching. Thank you all for being here tonight. As you know, new associates, hopefully you've heard this before, but new associates spend upwards of 35 to 40% of their time on this particular skill, on legal research. So I'm so excited that you're all taking advantage of our Excellence in Legal Research program to make sure that you have the most efficient legal research skills that you can to get you started into practice. If you don't know me, my name is Professor Baker. I'm the Associate Dean and Director of the Law Library at the law school. So tonight we're, as I mentioned, going over required session 4 on Boolean searching. So to get us started, I would like you to go to the Blackboard page, the course materials. I'll actually share that page with you now. So this is the Blackboard page. If you click on the link that says prediction exercise, okay, so I would like to take the first few minutes of class and have you fill out the prediction exercise. So go ahead and click on the file and download that so that you can manipulate the Word document. Let's go ahead and share that with you. Okay, so once you have the file in front of you, this is what it looks like. We call it a prediction exercise or a brain dump. And so I would like you to take, 3 to 5 minutes or so and answer the following questions. Question: why would someone use Boolean logic, what we also refer to as terms and connectors searching, to perform searching over simple keyword searching, what we often refer to as natural language searching? So thinking about if you know anything about Boolean searching and using terms and connectors over just typing in a few keywords in a search bar like you do in Google and clicking the search functionality. So why would someone choose to use Boolean logic over keyword searching, simple keyword searching, what we know as natural language searching? So take a few minutes and think about that question. To give you another idea to help you along the way. So, sorry, all of the screen sharing here. If I go back to the Blackboard page, you will also, right under the prediction exercise file, you will see a terms and connectors help file there. And that will give you a little bit of a preview of some of the things that we're going to talk about this evening. So Boolean searching, what it helps to do is define proximity, and you can choose if the word should be within the same sentence or the same paragraph. So if you take things like that, so if you take a look at that terms and connectors help file, it might help you as you're thinking about why someone would use Boolean logic over simple keyword searching. So as you're finishing up your thoughts here on that prediction exercise, the reason that we use those prediction exercises is to sort of get our brains working in the right area and get us thinking about the material that we're about to cover. So again, thinking about Boolean logic versus simple keyword searching and why you would want to use it. So now that you've had a few minutes to kind of think about that, does anyone want to share? There's no wrong answers. We're going to cover this content tonight. So would anyone like to share their thoughts about why someone would use Boolean logic, Boolean terms and connector searching instead of natural language?
One thing I could think of was to find certain like words or phrases in order, like as a particular phrase, instead of searching regular and having the words all mixed up.
Yeah, so that's a good start. So thinking about, how you're telling the database to retrieve information. So if we're talking about searching in Westlaw or Lexis or even Bloomberg Law, so telling the database how to perform the search versus relying on the database's algorithm to take your keywords and understand what to do with them. So it sort of just knowing that, is there any other reason, anything else anyone wants to share on why you might use Boolean searching?
I kind of would just echo that. It's just more efficient overall to search this way.
So I agree with you, right? So the reason we teach the fundamentals of Boolean searching in the Excellence in Legal Research program, we don't have a lot of time in our LP research workshops to really hit on these things. We're teaching you the 4-step legal research process and how to efficiently perform organized research. But this is an additional layer. And again, I'm so glad you're here taking advantage of this, because Boolean searching is still, in any of the databases, including Google, is still the most efficient way to do searching, and especially in the legal research databases. The algorithms that we know in the legal research databases have really only come about within the last 10 years, and they keep getting refined and they keep getting better. But with Boolean searching, you're in charge of what you want the database to retrieve versus using its algorithm to decide what is relevant for you. And I think, as I think about the cost of doing legal research, when you are out in practice and you're paying for access to Westlaw, for example, first of all, does anyone know how long you have access to Westlaw after you graduate as part of, your academic subscription of being a student? Does anyone know how long your access lasts after you graduate?
Isn't it only about 6 months after graduation?
So almost all of the other databases are 6 months. So one of the wonderful things, the law library has subscribed to what we call the Practice Ready subscription with Westlaw, and that allows you access for 18 months after graduation. So you have access for 1 year and 6 months after you graduate to Westlaw. And so I like to use Westlaw in a lot of my instruction, because I know you'll have access to it out in practice. But thinking about the access that you have as a student, this academic access in the databases, it's really unheard of in practice to have this level of access to all of the resources. It would be prohibitively expensive. What you normally see is, say, a jurisdictionally specific subscription. So that would mean if you're going to practice in Texas, it would be a Texas specific subscription to Westlaw, where you might have access to the statute, Texas statutes, Texas cases, and maybe one secondary source like Texas jurisprudence. And, the last numbers that we've seen, it's up to the individual to negotiate with the vendor, Westlaw, Thomson Reuters. But generally what you're seeing is that costs about $400 per month for just that limited access. Now you can do unlimited searching in Texas jurisprudence, in Texas statutes, Texas cases, and there's a lot of wonderful content there. But if you start to try to access materials outside of your subscription on the databases, you'll go into what is called a per document billing structure. And costs vary depending on the resources, but for secondary sources, many times the cost is $80 per document to open that resource. So if you think about the way that you perform searching on the databases, on Westlaw. And if you're just doing keyword searching and you're just clicking on a bunch of secondary source materials, maybe you're looking at American law reports, or you're looking at a treatise on point, every time you open one of those documents, you could be getting charged up to $80 to view it. And so if you think about the efficiency of just doing some keyword searching, natural language searching, and trying to click on things that are relevant to you, or trying to find those things that are relevant, and you spend a lot of time clicking on documents that may not be exactly what you're looking for, and every time you open one, you're getting charged $80, that is going to increase your legal research costs exponentially. And so Boolean searching is a way to make sure you're in the driver's seat. You're not relying on the database's algorithm to decide what is relevant for you. You're telling the database, this is what I want you to retrieve for me. So we're going to look at how to take keywords, the relevant keywords that we've identified. As part of our preliminary analysis, we're going to go back over the 4-step legal research process, which kind of gets into our agenda for today. So we've done the prediction exercise. We're going to think about our research strategy and think about where terms and connectors and Boolean searching fits into the overall research strategy, as well as how to properly conduct a terms and connectors or Boolean search to make it the most efficient method for searching. So when we get into the 4-step legal research process, who can tell me, based on what you know about that 4-step strategy, you learned it in LP, hopefully this is recall for you, what is step 1 of that process? What do we call that? Okay, so if there's anything that you remember about legal research by the time you graduate, it should be this 4-step legal research process. Again, we went over it in fall of your legal practice class. We touched on it in the spring of legal practice. It is something that you should be able to recite because you should know it enough to be able to use it as whenever you need it. And in fact, we have a lot of alumni who will contact us, recent graduates who are given their first research assignment, and they'll contact the library and they'll say, I don't know where to begin. Can you help me with my research? And so we calmly remind them of the 4-step research strategy that they learned in their legal practice courses, and again, reiterating them in an Excellence in Legal Research program. And you always have that now as a tool in your tool chest. You should be able to get started on research in an organized way and have an understanding of which resources you need to consult. So for step 1, again, I'll throw it out there again. Does anyone remember what step 1 of the research strategy is called?
Preliminary analysis.
Very good. So I heard a couple of people say the preliminary analysis, and that is step 1. And we're going to talk more about what that is in just a minute. What is step 2 of the legal research process?
Secondary sources.
Very good. So going from the preliminary analysis to secondary sources. How about step 3?
That'd be codified law.
Very good. Codified law. And step 4?
Case law.
Very good. Thank you. So the 4-step research process, this is what you should remember. And of course, you probably saw the slide, but I hope you were using your recall. The 4-step research process that you should remember and as a tool in your tool chest, the preliminary analysis, going to check for in secondary sources, then checking for the codified law, and ultimately searching for case law. So when it comes to your preliminary analysis, right, when we think about how you are coming up with your key terms, the preliminary analysis is generally you're either in the client interview or you're reading notes from a detailed client interview. You have a good understanding of the legal issue in front of you. And so what you're doing in that preliminary analysis is you're issue spotting. You're taking your law school education, you're taking the training that you have to now think like a lawyer. You'll never see the world in the same way again. So you're issue spotting legal issues that are implicated in the fact pattern. And as you're doing that, you're thinking about things like the location of where it happens for jurisdictional purpose. You're thinking about the relationship between the parties. Is there a special relationship like landlord-tenant or husband and wife or attorney-client or doctor-patient? Any special relationship between the parties that might create a greater legal duty or a greater legal consequence. You're thinking about the essential things that happen, both tangible and intangible things. So in this example, I often give, a car accident resulting from high speed. And so thinking about the essential key terms from that issue. So we need the car accident, right? That's the tangible thing. And then the intangible thing there is high speed, because if you're going at a high speed, that could implicate intent or recklessness, which is a greater legal consequence. And so having an understanding of how you're pulling out those key terms. Other things you might think about. So in terms of the cause of action, let's say you're dealing with a libel cause of action. So you've issue spotted libel as part of the fact pattern, and you have the basic definition of libel, which is saying something in writing that you know to be untrue. And so if you break that down even further as part of your preliminary analysis, and you're thinking about, okay, what is the mental state here required of libel? Saying something in writing that you know to be untrue. So what's our mental state there? If you think about that basic definition, what's the mental state required for libel?
Knowing.
Good. So anytime you see a black letter law definition that requires knowing, knowledge, it goes to intent. And again, if something is intentional or you're doing something intentionally, that is generally a greater legal consequence. And so pulling out that key term of know or knowing or intent is an important aspect of finding the essential key terms to do searching. Ultimately, we're looking for case law to find cases to analogize and distinguish the facts and predict the legal outcome in the case. So thinking about the mental state for the cause of action or the conduct for the cause of action. The conduct, so we think about that basic definition again, saying something in writing that you know to be untrue. What's the required conduct there?
You have to intend for it to be untrue.
So really here what I was getting to was the writing aspect. So it has to be in writing for it to be libel, right? So as opposed to slander, which is verbal. So if you're thinking it's a libel cause of action, that aspect of it being in writing is an important key term to pull out of there. So if you break down the cause of action in terms of mental state, in terms of conduct, in terms of injury, when we think about the injury in a libel case, what types of injury normally are we thinking about there?
Reputation.
Very good. So another key term that you might pull out of that is reputation. And so as you're thinking about what are my essential key terms that I need to pull out, those are the types of things that you want to consider with developing your search terms. And so that's what the preliminary analysis is all about. You're thinking about in a concerted way, what are my key terms? What are the essential key terms based on the facts as I know them, before then going to secondary sources, going to search in secondary sources using those key terms to find an overview of the law. And so we're looking in things like legal encyclopedias. What are the 2 national legal encyclopedias that you should know about at this point?
American Jurisprudence and Corpus Juris Secundum.
Very good. American Jurisprudence and Corpus Juris Secundum. And so those 2, when I say national encyclopedias, they're giving you a very general overview of a particular area of law. And then they're going to give you citations from across the country, from various jurisdictions. It's helpful. You can use those to get started in your research, but what is even more helpful is if you have a jurisdictionally specific legal encyclopedia. And so in Texas, what is our jurisdictionally specific legal encyclopedia called?
Texas jurisprudence.
Very good, Texas jurisprudence. And so if you have Texas jurisprudence, it's wonderful because that overview of the law is going to be directly related to Texas materials, Texas law. You're looking for the overview, the fairly basic overview, maybe including elements or a statute of limitations or a factor analysis if there is one. And then the citations to primary authority. And the primary authority that we're talking about here is any codified law or case law on point, which helps with the next steps of the research process. Now, when it comes to treatises, those are, much more detailed. You're getting into, instead of a fairly basic overview involved with the legal encyclopedia, treatises are going to be much more detailed and really get into the nuanced aspects of the area of law. You can look in law review articles, law reviews in journals. You can look in American law reports for information, practice manuals like Dorsanio's, which is on Lexis, or O'Connor's, which is on Westlaw. They're all going to give you really wonderful overviews, information, and what you're hoping is citations to primary legal authority on point. Also, don't forget about legal blogs. So when we think about the cost of research and practice, there are something like 4,000 legal blogs on the web. And so if you go, and many of them, most of them are topical. So if you want to find blogs on employment law, for example, you could find those. And you don't disregard using legal blogs for preliminary information where you are getting an overview with some citations to primary authority. Now, you have to be more discerning in how you're using that information, because as you know, anyone could post a blog post to the internet. You need to make sure, like these other resources, like a legal encyclopedia that has been edited and published by a reputable publisher, has been vetted, that information has been vetted and verified. If you're using a legal blog, you're doing that information. So you have to be discerning in the way that you're using it, not just taking it at face value, but really checking your resources to make sure that they're correct. And so checking in secondary sources to get that overview is important, because it can lead you to help you with the next steps of the research process, like checking for codified law and case law. So when it comes to codified law, we think of searching for codified law, 4 types of codified law: constitutions, statutes, regulations, and court rules. Okay. Can anyone tell me the interplay between statutes and regulations? Why do we search for those in tandem, really? What is the interplay between statutes and regulations?
Well, basically the regulations are what define and essentially enact the statute that is usually more broad term. So the regulations, you usually look into that to see the specific application of the statute by agencies.
Good, very good. So we think of, where we are in terms of the legal world today as more of a regulatory state. More things have been codified. So you generally have a statute. And as you know, the legislative body is creating the codified law, is creating the statute. There's an act that's been created by the legislative body. So let's say Congress creates an act. On the federal level, that act is then broken up into the corresponding titles of the United States Code. There are 54 titles to the United States Code. And in those statutes, you will find what is called enabling authority in some statutes for administrative agencies to create regulations in furtherance of the goals of the statute. So for example, if you have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Air Act is an act, again, it's going to be broken up into the relevant titles of the United States Code. And that act, the Clean Air Act, is going to provide enabling authority for which administrative agency do you think would be charged with, at least one administrative agency that would be charged with creating regulations for the Clean Air Act? So I would say it would be the Environmental Protection Agency, probably, right? So when you think about the different types of agencies. So in the Clean Air Act, there's going to be some sort of enabling authority in the codified law that gives enabling authority to, say, the Environmental Protection Agency to create regulations in furtherance of the goals of the statute. And so if you have enabling authority in front of you, if you have a statute in front of you, you're absolutely going to want to go to those regulations as you're doing statutory interpretation to understand how the regulations help further interpret the goals of the statute. Okay. Now, we also talk about best methods for searching for, in LP in particular, we had a session on best methods for searching for statutes and then best methods for searching for regulations. They are substantially similar. So the best method, one of the ways, is by citation, where if you're in a secondary source and it gives you a citation to a statute, for example, you can just type that in the search bar on Westlaw and it will take you right to that codified law section. There's also the table of contents method. So I'm referencing the United States Code. We know there are 54 titles to the United States Code. Every title is has a topical subject area. So Title 42, for example, is public health and welfare. So if you know that you have a statute that you're interested in that deals with public health and welfare, you can go to the United States Code and you can go to Title 42. And at the beginning of Title 42, whether you're looking online or in the books, there is a table of contents. And so you can dig in through the table of contents in that particular subject area to see if there's any codified law that you're interested in looking at. There's the keyword index for both statutes and regulations. So again, if we're on the federal level, we're talking about a keyword index to the United States Code annotated, which would be the Westlaw version, or United States Code Service, the Lexis version. So taking those keywords that you thought about in your preliminary analysis and using those in the keyword index, that keyword index is going to take you to relevant codified law sections on point. For statutes, there's also the popular names table. So if you know the popular name of the act, like the Clean Air Act, you can search the Clean Air Act and find the relevant statutory sections where it was broken up into the titles of the United States Code, for example. It's going to help you with the citations to that. It's more efficient to do searching for statutes and regulations using these methods than keyword searching. You can use it, but it's a little less efficient than using the keyword index or the by citation or table of contents method. Now, when it comes to regulations, there's one differing way to do efficient searching, and that is using the annotations to the statute. So if you have a statute in front of you and you want to know if there are regulations that you should be looking for, this is one of the wonderful things that the databases do for us, Westlaw and Lexis. They compile cross-references to relevant regulations. So if you have a United States Code section in front of you and you want to know if you should be checking any of the regulations, you can go to the cross-references section and take a look at any of the Code of Federal Regulations sections that are implicated by the statute. And that's a nice feature. It's one of the annotations to the statute that you can look at. And of course, checking for court rules is also important because you need to know the procedural rules. You need to know drafting rules as required by various court rules. So then we get to step 4 of the research process, which is searching for case law. And we think of you searching for 2 types of case law, right? Binding and persuasive precedent, binding precedent and persuasive precedent. So as we know, binding precedent is case law from a jurisdiction that the court must follow. You want, in your legal communication, if you are writing a memo or a brief to the court, you absolutely want to tackle the binding precedent. They're going to want to see the binding precedent. If it's there, they're going to want to know what it is. So you need to make sure that you have an understanding of binding versus persuasive and when to use which. So if we're in the 7th Court of Appeals of Texas, so we're in the State Court of Appeals system, we're in the 7th Court of Appeals, there are 14 of them. 7th Court of Appeals is where Lubbock sits. What would be binding on the 7th Court of Appeals of Texas?
The Texas Supreme Court.
Very good. What else? So we have that bifurcated Supreme Court system. So we've got the Texas Supreme Court. What's the other court called?
Court of Criminal Appeals.
Very good. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. They're higher level courts. So they would both be binding on the 7th Court of Appeals. What else is binding on the 7th Court of Appeals? This is the one
Prior decision by the Supreme Court.
Thank you. Prior decisions from the 7th Court of Appeals. Previous decisions from that court, they're bound by it. So making sure that you're looking up previous decisions from the 7th Court of Appeals, Texas Supreme Court decisions, Texas Court of Criminal Appeals decisions, depending on which area of law you're looking in. And then also thinking about what are the best cases to cite. So it's not enough to just plug in, a few keywords and just use whatever case is at the top of the list. You need to make sure that if, for example, you are citing to the black letter law, you're outlining, if you're, doing a premises liability cause of action and you want to know the elements to premises liability, the black letter law, you should be citing to the seminal case on point. And hopefully that's from the Texas Supreme Court. So the seminal case is the foundational case that sets the elements. It's what every other case really cites to for the elements of that particular cause of action. And so thinking about the quality and what you are citing to is also important in when you're choosing to which cases are going to advance your argument. Now, persuasive precedent, it's not listed here, but the description is case law from other jurisdictions that a court may follow, does not have to follow. Can you remember why you might use persuasive precedent? When might you use persuasive precedent?
There's no binding authority within your jurisdiction on the specific issue you're currently trying to deal with.
Very good. So there is no case law, binding case law in your jurisdiction. So you're going to use cases from other jurisdictions that do have case law, right, to make a persuasive argument that your jurisdiction should do the same thing. Why else might you use persuasive precedent? What if there is binding precedent, but you still want to use persuasive precedent? Why are you doing that?
You're attempting to change what the binding precedent in your jurisdiction is?
Yes. So you're making a policy argument. You're using it to make a policy argument that the law in your jurisdiction should change. The case law should go another direction, for example. So thinking about why you would use particular. So if you're in the 7th Court of Appeals of Texas, again, and you have a case in front of them, you've got the binding precedent. Thinking about the best persuasive precedent that you should use. Again, not enough to just put in a few keywords and find a case at the top of the list. Thinking about what is high level persuasive precedent. That would be cases from, say, the other courts of appeals of Texas. So there are 14 of them. Binding precedent comes from the 7th Court of Appeals of Texas. So maybe you're finding good cases from the 14th Court of Appeals of Texas, and you want to use that information. That would be high level persuasive precedent rather than going lower courts or to courts from other states. So thinking about why you would choose a particular case is important. Now, the best methods for searching for case law, we think of by citation again. So maybe in your secondary source, there's a citation that you have to case law. Plugging in the report or the volume, the page number will take you to the case, right? And then the next way is what we call the one good case number, or using the topic and key number system. So if you have a case in front of you on Westlaw, you have all of those head notes, right? So the West editors have pulled out the legal issues, the pertinent legal issues, and they've assigned each of those issues a head note, and every head note has a topic and key number attached to it. And it's a greater part of a digest system where every case, for example, that's on Westlaw or is published by West Publishing is part of this topic and key number system. So if you have one in front of you and you click on the topic and key number, it will take you to other cases that has a head note that has the same or similar legal issue. And then you can refine by jurisdiction and find additional cases on point. And again, hopefully this is all just review for you, but I think the more you hear it, the better it is. Now, annotations to a statute are, again, a really great way to find case law. So if you are in the codified law, if you're searching for codified law and you find a statute, you can click on, in Westlaw, for example, the Notes of Decisions tab. So the Notes of Decisions are going to be cases that the West editors have identified that help interpret the statute. And so they're attached right to the statute. It's a really efficient method to find good cases that help interpret for statutory interpretation, right? And then last but not least, this is really the area where Boolean searching comes in very handy. You can use it to search in secondary sources, but Boolean searching is also really helpful when you're searching for case law. And this is where you are thinking about how the words appear in case law documents. So you have your key terms. How are you going to connect them? Are they in the same sentence? Are they in the same paragraph? Are they in the same document? Are they synonyms that you're connecting with or, like car or truck or auto or van? So you get to decide all of that, and then you do searching in a cases database like Texas state cases for your issue for your key terms, and that's when you're getting some of those more efficient results. And so we're going to go over the basics of Boolean searching and the rest of class tonight, and then your exercise is going to ask you to create some Boolean searching, so you'll get some practice with it. Okay, and so before we get to terms and connectors or Boolean searching, the reason we teach you this research strategy is obviously because it is organized, it's efficient. A lot of times, like I said, we have recent graduates who will contact us and they feel like a deer in headlights if they're working at a firm and a partner gives them their first legal research assignment and they just think, oh my goodness, I don't know where to start. So, this is, you can start, do your preliminary analysis, come up with your key terms, go to secondary sources, check for the codified law, check for the case law. It really helps, and you can use it in any resource. It can be in conjunction with print and electronic resources. For example, if your firm has Texas jurisprudence in print, you can use that in print, but you can use, the databases for cases and statutes. So making sure that you think about how to do it, no matter which resources you're using, it can be very helpful, and it reduces that anxiety that you have about performing legal research. So let's talk about terms and connectors. So when it comes to searching, we think of two major ways of doing searching: natural language, and this is what you're used to doing. This is the Google type searching. And most of you at this point, Google came out in '98. Most of you, it's getting to be where you've been born around that time if you're in law school. So most of you don't remember a time, if you're a traditional law student, really without Google, and you've been using keyword searching really throughout your entire education. It's not the most efficient way to do searching in the legal databases, which is why, again, we're going to talk about Boolean searching. It is like searching in Google. Now, there are some times when you might use what we call natural language keyword searching. If you just need an overview of the topic, you're not even sure what the key terms of art are or the essential legal terms are, you're really just getting a feel for something. You might just do some keyword searching to see if you can find relevant materials to then help you come up with the key terms to create Boolean searching. If you have an issue with unusual terminology, so if, for example, you have a product name that is unusual, like the ShamWow, I think of that one. So ShamWow is an unusual, I don't even know if there's still infomercials about that, but those are infomercials that we used to see all the time. I think it was like a car wash cloth called the ShamWow or something like that. Anyway, so if you are dealing with unusual terminology like a product name, you can generally get away with keyword searching because usually, if you search ShamWow, you're going to find relevant materials on point because it has an unusual name. The only time that I really use terms and that I don't use terms and connector searching, the only time that I use natural language searching is generally if I'm not getting the results that I need with Boolean searching. I've been doing, I've been legal research expert really since about 2010. And so I've been doing this and teaching legal research since about 2010, and I still use Boolean searching. It's still the most efficient way to do searching, terms and connector searching. But there are some times when I'll perform Boolean searching and I'm not quite seeing the results that I need. And so then I might go to natural language searching to see what's out there, but that's very few and far between. So let's talk about terms and connector searching, Boolean searching. Again, this puts you in control of the algorithm. You're telling the database what you want it to retrieve. What you're doing with terms and connector searching is that you're searching word patterns in a document. You're thinking about, okay, are these in the same sentence, in the same paragraph? You can search alternative terms, synonyms, where you're limited in doing that with keyword searching. So searching for alternative terms like car or truck or auto or van or vehicle if you're searching for a car accident. You can define the proximity. So this is where you can, it really helps you with your relevance. If you can find where, if you can anticipate what legal scholars and judges, how they're going to refer to the issue. Generally, are you going to see this within the same sentence? You get to define that proximity, and that means that your results will be a little more relevant. And you'll see examples of this in just a minute. With terms and connector searching, you can also just search a part of a document. Now, the wonderful thing in the databases in Lexis and Westlaw, their advanced search functionality will often help you with this. And I'll show you that when we get into the database. But oftentimes, if you're searching in a secondary source, for example, and you want to do a title search and you put your keywords in the title, usually if your keywords are in the title of the document, that means that that document is highly relevant to you. So it's a really great way to hone in on relevant materials. And again, it's still the best method for searching within a document. So if you have a document in front of you, if you have a case in front of you, for example, and you want to search within the case, doing Boolean searching, and in fact, if you're doing a search within results, so you've done a search, you've done a broad search, and you have 7,000 results, and so you're doing another search within results, that requires Boolean searching. The database Westlaw at least requires you to use Boolean searching. So this is a good skill for you to have. It's a good skill for you to practice while you have quote unquote free access to the databases. You're not being charged per search. So while you're in school, utilizing this to make sure that you get good at it now, not when you're being charged for research out in practice. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of Boolean connectors. So we think of two types of connectors. We have an OR connector and an AND connector. So in this instance, the OR connector here is generally used between synonyms, alternative terms. So if you are dealing with a legal issue, dealing with children, thinking of alternative terms, child or minor, right? So thinking about those alternative terms and putting an or between the words. You don't want both words to appear in the document. You want one or the other to appear in the document. Whereas the AND search is looking for both words in the document, right? So if we have an issue dealing with disability discrimination, we want both of those words to appear in the document. We don't want disability or discrimination. We want disability and discrimination to appear in the document. And so we're only trying to find those documents with both words. And so there's really only one way to do OR. It's literally typing OR between the words. So if you have word one or word two, that's generally, again, using alternative terms. That's how you draft your search. And it's gonna build throughout the rest of the session so that you can see how to construct a full site search string. We call it search string, excuse me. So there are multiple ways then to find words within the same document. You can use and between the words, word one and word two, and I'll show you this on the next slide. So if we think of it as and, now you can type out the word and, or you can use the umpers and, the and symbol. They work the same way. You can use the /p, the /s, or a /n, and the n is a variable. It stands for any number between 1 and 255. So let's talk a little bit more about what each of these do. So if we're trying to find words within the same document, and so notice you can do word one and word two. This is finding words within the same document. Now this is a very broad search still, because word one could be the first word in the document and word two could be the very last word in the document. So thinking about, do I need to hone in and make the proximity closer to find relevant materials, or when do I want to use it to find words just within the same document? It's a very broad search to just use and. Or you could use same paragraph /p. So it would be word one /p word two, where you're looking for the words within the same paragraph. You could use the /s, word one /s word two, where you're looking for the words within the same sentence. And then again, that /n, any variable between 1 and 255. So if you want the words word one /4 word two, you're looking for word one within 4 words of word two. Now a /25 corresponds with about a /s in the same sentence, and a /75 corresponds with about a /p, the same paragraph. Now the difference in the way that the databases treat those is that with a /p and a /s, the databases take into account end punctuation. So is it actually within the same sentence or the same paragraph? If you're using numbers, it doesn't take into account end punctuation on a sentence or a paragraph. It really just is looking for word one within 25 words of word two, or word one within 75 words of word two. So either one will work, but those are sort of the distinctions there. And we'll talk again more about how you use these in a citation sentence or search sentence. So next I want to talk about quotation marks. As you're using quotation marks create a literal phrase around whatever you put them around. The databases are going to treat anything in quotes as one big word. And so you have to be careful in how you're using quotation marks, because you want to use them for things that you know legal scholars or judges are really only going to say one way. They're a term of art. And so things like fruit of the poisonous tree, we know is a legal term of art. Generally, if there is an evidentiary issue that has the fruit of the poisonous tree is implicated, somewhere in the document, you will see fruit of the poisonous tree as a legal term of art, as a phrase. And so using quotation marks around that would be appropriate. Same thing with reasonable suspicion. It's a legal term of art. Or if you're looking for the name of an act, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, you know that generally it's going to be said at least once that way in the document, because that's what the act that you're looking for, or information about that act. So be careful in how you're using quotation marks. And I want to show you why. Because if you've taken, you take torts, you talk about products liability. And you remember design defect and products liability. So let's say you are looking for cases that deal with design defect, and you think to yourself, oh, that's a term of art, I'm going to put it in quotation marks. And so you do that, but then you see other cases where they might say something like there was a defect in the design. So design defect is in the same sentence. Those words are in the same sentence, but they're not right next to each other in a phrase. So what a better search would be is design/S defect, a design within the same sentence as defect, because it's going to pick up the cases where design defect is right next to each other as that phrase, as well as where the words are in the same sentence, but they're not right next to each other, okay? So thinking about when you want to use quotes and when you want to use proximity connectors like /S and /P. And an even better search, as we're going to see in just a moment, is using the exclamation point, what we refer to as the root expander on each of the words. So it would be design exclamation point /S defect exclamation point. And what that's doing is finding all of the variations of those words, like design, designing, designs, designed, ed at the end, within the same sentence as all of the variations of the word defect or defective. So you don't have to type those out. The root expander can help you with those. And so let me show you the distinction here. So if I was in the Texas State Cases database looking for cases that deal with design defect, if I put design defect in quotation marks, I retrieved 538 results, cases. If I put design within the same sentence as defect, design/S defect, it was 844 results. And if I put the root expander, the exclamation point on both of those, it was 1,657 results. As a researcher, which one do you want to use? Which one do you think you want to use?
Clearly, the search terms that include the root expanders, because it gives you a greater wealth of resources to pick from.
Very good. So it's a bit of a trick question. We kind of just talked about it, right? So the best search would be the bottom one with 1,657 results, because the best case for you, say you're wanting to find one that has facts that are most similar to the case that's in front of you, and to give yourself the best opportunity to find a case dealing with design defect with the facts closest to yours, you would want the most cases here, 1,657, because your best case might be in those 1,657 and not included in the 538. And so you would want to use the search, the 1,657, and then maybe add additional things to the search, or do a search within results for specific facts that you're looking for to really hone in on the best case to make, to analogize and distinguish and predict the legal outcome. Okay, so we're gonna, again, see how this all works together in just a moment. In the databases, when you are searching using terms and connectors, you want to use the singular of a word over the regular plural. So what the databases will do, if you use the singular, it will add an S to the end to automatically look for the regular plural. So if you, if you're looking for car or cars, it will automatically look for cars for you. You want to make sure to type in car because it will look for cars for you. Sometimes the databases can be finicky, and if you put cars, it won't look for the singular for a car. So we know that the singular is the better way to do searching because the database will automatically look for what we call the regular plural. Now there's a caveat to this where if something is an irregular plural, like foot or feet, knife or knives, you would have to actually spell those out in your search. Foot or feet, knife or knives. It's not going to look for those automatically for you. Okay, so thinking about using the singular, and if you have a word that's an irregular plural, do you need to spell both words out? This is an example of title field searching. And again, the advanced search functionality is getting better at helping you with these. But if you know this, you can just conduct this search yourself. So if I'm in a secondary source, like I'm in American Law Reports or something, and I'm looking for information on the Fair Labor Standards Act. In Westlaw, to do a title search, you type TI, open paren, and then you put your keywords in the parentheses connected by a connector. So here I'm just using and. And so you have to be careful about this because depending on the database that you're using, if you did not put a connector between the words and that and wasn't there and you just had Fair Labor Standard, in Westlaw, that defaults to an or search. So it would be fair or labor or standard if you put no connector between the words. And that's, you want all three of those words to be in your title search. You don't want one or the other. You don't want fair or labor or standard. You want all three. So you have to make sure to use a connector between the words. And so in this instance, you can use you can spell out and, you can use the umpers and, you can use the /s, which is what I often do because generally a title is only one sentence long. You could use a /2, any connector, just making sure that you're getting all of the words in the title and not having it default to an or search on you. And the Lexis version is spelling out the word title. So you'd spell out title and then you would put your keywords with connectors in the parentheses. And that would just be performing a title search, which is called field searching. And again, if your keywords are in the title, that generally means that document is going to be highly relevant to you. So let's get back to the root expander using the exclamation point, finding the variations of the word for you. So with terms and connectors, it's helpful to use the root expander so that you don't have to type out all the variations of a word. So for example, if I'm looking for the variations of the word retaliate, you can see on the bottom of the slide here, the key to this is sort of thinking ahead and thinking about all of the variations of the word, retaliate, retaliated, retaliation, retaliating. Think about the last letter that all of those words have in common. And that's where you want to cut your word off when you're using the root expander. So the last letter that all of the variations have in common, and then you put the exclamation point on the end and it will find all of those variations for you. The reason you want to take it out to the last letter that they all have in common is because it will eliminate or make it less likely that you're retrieving irrelevant results. If you were to say just do RETAL and put the exclamation point on there on the end, you might get results that you weren't intending. So taking it out to the last letter that they all have in common is the best method to make sure that you're not having irrelevant results. So what I want you to do now is go to the Blackboard page and download the exercise, the final assessment for this session. So I'm going to share that. So at the bottom of the screen, you will see, this is the link to submit the exercise when you're finished with it. I'm sure you're all familiar with that at this point. And then you see the document here, exercise fundamentals of Boolean searching.docx. This is going to be your final assessment for the class. And what I would like you to do right now, just based on this limited knowledge that you have, in the exercise, once you download it, there are 3 issues that you're going to be creating Boolean searching for. Open up the exercise. Oops, that's not the one I need. So when you have the exercise in front of you, start with issue 1. So we're going to, it's ultimately looking for information from the Fifth Circuit dealing with the search of luggage in an airport. That's the very basic issue that you're dealing with. So what I would like you to do is take that very basic issue and pull out the important key terms. I want you to think of reasonable synonyms, reasonable alternatives for those terms. And then I would like you, just based on what you know so far, to create a terms and connectors search using the key terms that you identified, using the synonyms, using proximity connectors. This is just to get your brain working, to get you thinking about how to use these things. And then we're going to continue. You're going to do this one as sort of our hands-on in-class exercise. We're going to then do it together before you move on to the rest of the other 2 issues in the final assessment and submit it. So take, 5 to 7, let's go 7 minutes and do issue 1 where you're pulling out the important key terms. You're thinking about reasonable synonyms for those terms, the alternative terms. You're constructing a terms and connectors search based on what you know, and just stop at the bottom of page 1 at this point. And then we'll come back together in just a few minutes, and let's actually just go 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 6:01. We'll come back together and do this together before, again, you just go off on your own to finish issue 2 and issue 3. So I will see you all in 5 minutes at 6:01 p.m. So now that you've had some time to kind of think about that, let's go through and do the sample search together the way that I would recommend conducting it, okay? So we are looking for information from the Fifth Circuit dealing with the search of luggage in an airport. So the way that you want to kind of go about this is, and part of your preliminary analysis, and not only developing, if you're going to do Boolean searching, developing your search terms, but using the search strategy where you're finding the key terms for your issue, which is what your preliminary analysis is all about, right? Including any terms of art. Then going beyond that to then do the Boolean searching where you're checking for synonyms, alternative terms. You're going to consider the way that the words appear in a document. So thinking about, again, thinking forward to how are legal scholars and judges likely to talk about this issue? Will it be in the same sentence? Will it be in the same paragraph? And then you're going to take your key terms and the synonyms, and you're going to combine those with proximity connectors. /S's within the same sentence, /P within the same paragraph, /25 within 25 words of each other. Are you just using or between the words for alternative terms? And then ultimately, once you've got your terms and connector search constructed, you are identifying sources to search in. And generally that's going to be then step 2 of the research process, looking in secondary sources. So let's go ahead with our sample search again. So we're looking for information from the Fifth Circuit dealing with the search of luggage in an airport. What did you identify as the pertinent key terms for the issue?
Luggage, search, and airport.
Very good. That's exactly what I would have identified. So search, luggage, airport. If you decided that the Fifth Circuit was important, it is important for jurisdictional purposes, but that's where you're going to set your jurisdiction function to do searching in, say, codified law and case law. You're going to look in the United States Code, or you're going to look in Fifth Circuit cases. So understanding how you use the jurisdiction functionality for that in the databases. But the key terms for the issue: search, luggage, airport. Very good. So the next thing we want to do is then come up with the alternative terms, the synonyms for those. And if you think ahead, some of the synonyms that I came up with. So I have my main search terms here: search, luggage, airport, in bold at the top of each of the strings. And so when you think about this, based on your law school education, you know that this issue is often talked about in terms of search and seizure, right? So you might identify the variations of the word search, but also seize and the variations of the word seizure to make sure that you're getting all of the, the best cases or best resources that you can get for this particular term. And then we've got luggage. So thinking about luggage, thinking about alternative terms for luggage like suitcase, bag, or baggage, right? And then airport. So, and an airport is important, right? Because that's where it occurred, but keeping in mind, could you make analogies to the search of luggage on an airplane? If you're not having the best of luck with airport, do you also want to include airplane and make analogies and distinctions to it? And then what is an alternative term for airplane? Could just be plane, right? So now what do we do with all of these terms? How do we construct our search? So the first thing that I would recommend doing. Now, I only use parentheses around alternative terms. When I'm looking for synonyms, I put all of those in parentheses just to keep my search organized. The parentheses at this point aren't really doing much for you other than just keeping things organized, because depending on how sophisticated your Boolean search gets, it can get a little unruly. So if you take the synonyms, the alternative terms that you have constructed and thought about, and put those in parentheses and separate them by or. So that's what we're doing here. Parenthesis, search with an exclamation point. The root expander is finding the variations of the word search, or C's, and we're thinking about the variations of the word C's, taking out to the last letter that they all have in common, putting the root expander on. And so now we have those alternative terms in parentheses. We want one or the other to show up in the document is what it's saying there. And then we take the alternative terms for luggage, the synonyms for luggage. And so here we're doing bag with an exclamation point to get bag or baggage, or luggage or suitcase. We don't want all of those terms in the document. We want one or the other, right? Alternative terms. And then for looking for airport or airplane, we could do air with an exclamation point or plane. Might be one way to construct. Now, this is a good time to think about, now searching in this way, and really legal research in general, is more of an art than a science. If you are doing the search and you're looking at the results and you're seeing that this search is making you come up with some irrelevant results, you need to revise your search terms. Go back and revise your search terms. So if air with an exclamation point on it is bringing you a bunch of irrelevant search results, think about using the full word, airport or airplane kind of thing. So just making sure that you're paying attention to your results, you're seeing what's there, you're revising as needed. So this is bringing together the alternative terms, the synonyms, right? Now, how are we going to connect these? What proximity connectors are we going to use? And this is the next slide here. So I take my alternative terms, and when I think about how legal scholars or judges are likely to discuss this issue, I think that for relevant materials, the search of luggage will generally be in the same sentence. And this is just a prediction at this point. You're thinking about how, is this, what's going to give me the most relevant materials? And so I'm going, and so this is what you would type in the entire search bar, would be starting with the first parenthesis, search or C's /S, so within the same sentence as bag, baggage, or luggage, or suitcase. And then I want that within the same paragraph as airport or airplane, because when I think about how legal scholars or judges are likely to say, how close the luggage is to airport or airplane, I'm thinking that's probably within the same paragraph. Now, this is just a prediction based on what you know and the patterns that you see in documents. And the more that you read on a particular issue, you're going to get better at identifying the proximity connectors. And this is just a starting point. Again, if I am not finding the relevant materials based on this, then maybe I need to expand. And instead of using a /S, I'm going to use a /P. Or maybe instead of a /P, I'm going to use the and symbol to have them within the same document, but not so close to each other. So just thinking about, this is where, again, it gets to be more of an art than a science, and you need to revise your searches based on what you found. But this is how you would type this entire thing out into your search bar. So if I'm in, say, Texas State Cases Database, this is the search, or at this point, I'm looking in the Fifth Circuit, right? So I'm in Fifth Circuit cases, and this is the search that I would conduct to see what I got and if I need to revise my search going forward. But again, you are deciding what the database is retrieving versus it just retrieving based on what it decides is relevant. And because legal research is so expensive and the database is charged so much, I like to be in control of that, right? I like to know what I'm searching and what the database is retrieving. I do want you to know about one more. So if your search didn't look like this, don't fret. You're going to have more in your exercise. You're going to have more samples to work from. Now on page 2 of the final assessment, let me share that again. So this begins page 2, where in paragraph form, I'm now sort of giving you, after you have a chance to kind of come up with the search yourself, it's an important thing to do for you to get practice. The next thing I describe is in paragraph format, how your search should really be constructed. So it says, build a search that contains the variations of the word search. So when you see variations of the word, that should signify to you, oh, I need to put the exclamation point, the root expander in there. Or the variations of the word seizure. So I'm, again, finding the variations of the word seizure within the same sentence as the variations of the word baggage, or the word luggage, or the word suitcase. Within the same paragraph as the variations of the word airport, or the word airplane, or the word plane. So that description in paragraph format is getting you to the recommended search that we have on our slide. So I want you to try it yourself first, and then I'm going to, in the exercise, describe it in paragraph form to assist you with how you want to construct your search. Now, keep in mind, when you're putting these in the search bar, there's a space between word 1, search, and or, and then there's a space after or before you get to the second word. And then when you're using the proximity connectors, there's a space between the parenthesis, the end parenthesis here, and then the /s, and there would be a space after. That's often a mistake. Sometimes I also see students do s/, for example, instead of /s. Those things will matter. Your search won't come out correctly if you're not using the terms and connectors the way they're intended to be used. So keep that in mind. There's of the spacing and where the slashes and the letters come into play. One thing that I want you to also keep in mind, a connector that I find that is particularly helpful. William, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, just quick clarification. You said that there does need to be a space between the /s, right?
So the / and the s go together, but there's a space before. So if you look at the slide that's in front of us right now, there's a space in the end parenthesis before you get to the /, and then there would be a space after the s before you get to the next parenthesis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
You're welcome. So a connector that I want you to be aware of that a lot of folks sort of forget about, but one that I think is very helpful is the not connector or the exclusion, what we call the exclusion connector. So if you're getting a lot of irrelevant results based on the search that you did, and you're seeing a pattern in the irrelevancy, you can use in Westlaw, you can use but not, or you can use the percentage sign, which means but not. In Lexis, and this says Lexis Advanced, it's called Lexis Plus now, right? You can use and not. And in Bloomberg Law, it also recognizes and not. So let's talk about how you would use that. I had a student who was writing a comment for law review on the misuse of child support payments, okay? And she constructed her search for the misuse of child support payments, and she was doing case law searching. And every case that came up was also dealing with where there was abuse or neglect. And she didn't want to tackle the abuse or neglect component. She really just wanted to talk about misuse of child support, whatever that means. And she wanted to get a definition from case law and have an understanding of an analysis there. So she wanted to remove any of the cases that talked about abuse and neglect. So the way that we ended up constructing that search is at the bottom of the slide here. We did child support in quotation marks because generally if the the case is talking about child support, it will say it that way at least one time. And we did that within the same sentence as misuse, because we were talking about the misuse of child support. And then we did the percentage sign. So we were in Westlaw in the cases database, and we did the percentage sign. And then in parentheses, we put abuse or neglect. So what this is doing is it's looking for child support within the same sentence as misuse, but it's going to remove in the results any case that says abuse or neglect in it. And so you're really just honing in on the material that you're looking for, rather than having all of this irrelevant material that you don't maybe want to tackle. So think about looking at your results and how you're analyzing your results, especially when you're searching for cases, and see if there's a pattern to the results that you're finding, the results that you don't want, and can you use this exclusion connector to eliminate those from your search, so that you're really just honing in on what you're looking for. And of course, you wouldn't be able to do this with simple keyword searching. So this is some of the benefit of really getting and digging down into the material that you're looking for. So now I want you to tackle issue 2, right? So issue 2 is in your final assessment. There are 2 remaining issues. Issue 2 is, in an action for copyright infringement, is an advertisement considered a parody and thus fair use within the meaning of the Copyright Act? So just like you did before, I'm going to stop and then share the exercise again. So just like you did before, issue 2, it states the issue: in an action for copyright infringement, is an advertisement considered a parody and thus fair use within the meaning of the Copyright Act? So you're going to pull out your key terms, just like you did last time. You're going to look for reasonable synonyms, and sometimes there are not. And if you have a term of art, you're putting it in quotation marks, right? And then, to end page 2 is for you to, based on what you know right now, create a terms and connector search using the key terms, the synonyms, the proximity connectors, how the words would likely appear in the document, and you create that search. And then after you've had a chance to create that search, you follow this paragraph description of how you would construct it. But please go through some of the struggle of creating the search yourself. It's really how you're going to learn how to use Boolean searching. And then there's one more remaining issue for you for the final assessment. Does the implied warranty of habitability between a landlord and tenant cover a broken refrigerator? And so again, pulling out the key terms, looking for reasonable synonyms, you going through the struggle of creating that search before looking at my paragraph description of the recommended search. Okay, and then there's one last question for you to answer at the bottom. So this is what is due by Friday. So it would be due by tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. So please complete issue 2 and issue 3, the remaining issue 1, if you haven't done that paragraph yet. So totally complete the final assessment by tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. and use the link on Blackboard to submit your final result. And of course, you need an 85 out of 100 to get credit for the session. I will be grading them probably next week, so you will be getting your scores then. If you have any questions as you're going, please contact me. I'm not going to keep you here tonight to finish it. You can finish it at your leisure, and just make sure that you are submitting it by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Are there any questions right now?
I had a quick question, if that's okay. So I saw on the instructions for issue 1 and issue 2, it says variations of, the word X or Y. Is that where we're going to be plugging in more like the synonyms and the root, like the exclamation point that changes the suffixes? Is that where we would incorporate that? I just want to be sure that I follow the directions correctly.
Yeah, so when it says variations of the word, that should signify to you that you want to use the root expander. That's what that's all about. So when you see variations of the word, that says to you, oh, she's getting to, I want to use the root expander. So whatever word, so if I'm on issue 1 here, the variations of the word search, that should tell you however you're constructing search, make sure that you're thinking about the variations of the word and that you're using the exclamation point to get all of those variations. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So we don't need to be putting in like other synonyms for search, if that makes sense. Like
Right. So the ones, it depends. I want you to go through the process of thinking about synonyms and how to connect them. But when it
Right.
comes to the paragraph, it won't always ask for the synonyms, right? So, I mean, I built them in by saying the variations of the word search or the variations of the word seizure. Those are the
Right.
that we're thinking of, the alternative terms. And then the variations of the word baggage or the word luggage or the word suitcase, I built those synonyms in already. So for the paragraph description of the recommended search, you're just following it to a T and kind of thinking about when it says variations of the word using the exclamation point, when it says using, you know, if it's the variations of the word baggage or luggage or suitcase, how would you put those together to construct those? And the slide, the PowerPoint slide is essentially describing, let me go back to that, that is describing that paragraph. So when you look at the paragraph and then you compare it to, you know, the sample search that we did, it's just describing this search here, essentially.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions real quick. Do the and or need to be all caps?
No,
Or
that
does it
doesn't
not
matter.
matter?
You can do it either way. I just sort of do it
Okay.
to make sure that you can see it.
Right. And then are the parentheses, did you say those are just optional, like to keep things like organized visually?
That's correct. So I use them. They used to really matter, but now they matter less. So I use them just to keep my search organized. They are optional.
Cool, thanks.
And I really only use them around alternative terms. So if I have a lot of synonyms that I'm looking for, like bag or luggage or suitcase, that's where I'm putting them around the alternative terms.
But the system will like automatically separate things out. Like if you just said search or seize and then /s, it knows that it's like, it organizes them itself in its algorithm.
That's right. So that's the last I've been told. So they, you know, parentheses used to make a difference. And then I was told that they no longer made a difference. So if you are doing searching and you see, you know, a discrepancy there, then, you know, plug in those parentheses. But Westlaw has assured me that the parentheses no longer matter.
Gotcha, cool.
It's interesting how those
things. And then you haven't graded the last ELR you did, right?
No, I'm still getting to that. So I'm hoping.
Okay, cool. No worries, no rush at all. I just wanted to make sure like my thing submitted. I looked at it today.
Yep.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So if there are no other questions, that's it for tonight. And again,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So just conceptually speaking, and you might have said this and I just kind of glossed over, but so the parentheses that we just talked about aren't necessary, but when you're looking at this search on like a single line,
right,
is the /s going to only apply to bag or luggage or suitcase along with search and or seizure, or will like or does the search kind of combine things together depending on what's directly in front of it and leaves out, like you wouldn't have air or airplane in the same sentence as search or seizure, right? Or how does that work conceptually speaking?
Right. So this is why I still default to using parentheses, because I don't necessarily trust the way that they're telling me the search is and this happens with the databases because it does, they do change over time. So this is why I still use the parentheses, and that's why I would recommend that you do that. But I've been told that if you do search or seizure like this, and then within the same sentence as bag or luggage or suitcase, it's looking for search or seizure within the same sentence as bag or luggage or suitcase. It's not just looking for seizure within the same sentence as bag or baggage kind of thing, the ones that are right next to each other. That's what Westlaw has most recently told me. Again, I still use the parentheses. So just to make sure that not only your search is organized, but that the database is doing what you want it to do, I would recommend using the parentheses. It's purportedly not a requirement anymore.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, and both of those two, I guess, concepts, the search or seizure, bag or luggage or suitcase, all will be applied within the same paragraph as air or plane.
That's,
like it's doing all of that for air and plane.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, it's just a little confusing with how it's all, you know, I don't think like a computer, I guess.
Well, and that's the thing is like the way that a computer traditionally thinks would be what happens is the parentheses used to be so important because the computer would read what's in the parentheses first before reading the connector. And so that's why we always constructed it that way. But then we were told that the parentheses didn't matter anymore. And again, I still like to use them because I know how a computer reads things. And I also, it does help to keep your search a little more organized. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got one quick question just concerning the way the assignment's supposed to be tackled.
Sure.
So for issues 2 and 3, where it says create terms and connector search using the key terms and synonyms, we're supposed to go ahead and, based off of what we pull off from the key terms and synonyms and what we know, try to create our own custom search without using the last part of the question where you give us basically the paragraph suggestion, right? We're supposed to ignore that paragraph until we complete our own organically created search.
Yes, please, because I want you to struggle with creating terms and connectors. I don't want you to just read my description and follow it closely because you're not really struggling with thinking about how you're going to construct synonyms and proximity connectors. So please do the exercise in order. So complete the question about creating your own terms and connector search before you do sort of the paragraph recommended search. And that'll give you some instantaneous feedback in some way about how you should construct it.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome.
For answering the synonyms question, is there like a limit on what word we need to put there? Can we just kind of put what we think of?
Well, so that's why we say reasonable synonyms. You want to think about, it's always about sort of what you're looking for and how are legal scholars and judges going, what are some reasonable alternative terms that they might use to talk about the issue. And again, this is where you might do a search and find that you need to add more, or you could take some out kind of thing. So it really depends on what you're finding, but a reasonable amount, not anything crazy. You could probably, like the example that I give, car or auto or truck or van or, vehicle, you could do a lot of them. But when you think about how legal scholars and judges generally talk about automobiles, they're talking about automobiles. So that would be auto, automobile, that would be vehicle, right? So those would probably be the more reasonable synonyms to use in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But it's good, again, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're getting the fundamentals of Boolean searching, and it's really good to get additional practice with it. I would recommend that whenever you're doing searches in the database that you're thinking about using this so that you can get good at it for when you're out in practice. And we're always here to help you construct searches. I'm glad that you're here getting the extra practice. Any other questions for tonight? Okay, good luck on your final assessment. Be in touch if you need anything, and I will likely get them graded next week. Have a good evening.